Welcome back on the AM show. Even before we get to the thrust of the first big story we're going to be looking at, how about I remind you that if you're male, about 61% of your body composition is water. And if you're female, almost 60%. Anywhere between 55 and 60% is water, which is why you need to actually refresh yourself with water a lot more times during the day. And here's the perfect suggestion for you. Awake purified drinking water. We know water is life. So if you're going to be drinking, how about you go through or you select that one which goes through that strict purification process to ensure that every bottle on the market refreshes you better. Now we have the perfect sizes for everybody. 330 ml bottles, 500 ml for those who want to drink just a little, maybe even the kids. You can pack that into their lunch box for them. 750 milliliters for those who want a bit more, 1.5 liters for those who want a whole lot more, like I would do. But if you're thinking of something for your office or home, how about you get that 19-liter jar bottle and then you're sorted, everything would be taken care of. So just grab a bottle of Awake Purified Drinking Water. Remember, it is one for life as well. For every purchase you make, an amount is donated to the National Cardiothoracic Center. That indeed is heartwarming. It's another quality product from Casapreco Company Limited. If you'd like to purchase in bulk, this is the number to call. 0262 351 251. 0262 351 251. Remember, this advert is FDA approved. But let's get into that big story now. Independent power producers need $450 million to stay afloat and avert shutting down their plants. Now, government is seeking to renegotiate some $1.3 billion in debt. The questions we are asking, though, how is this going to be done? Is this going to meet the requirements of these independent power producers? What, in essence, is the way out of this very sticky situation? Well, joining us for a conversation, we have Adams Yakubu. He is an energy analyst with the IES. We also have Kojo Poku, an energy analyst, and Dr. Yusuf Sulemana, an energy analyst as well. All of them join us on this conversation. I'd like to say a very good morning to you, gentlemen, for those we have joining the conversation.
Hi, Ben, good morning.
Kojo, I hear you. Good morning to you. How have you been?
I'm very well. Like I said, the brooch, when you buy the brooch, please buy one for your brother.
Yeah, nice way to kick off the conversation. Anyway, so let me also say a very good morning to the rest of our guests. Do we have Adams Yakubu?
Yes, Kojo, good morning to you and good morning to Doc as well.
Hi, good morning.
All right, so I am Benjamin, by the way, Mr. Yakubu. But let's get into let's get into the conversation. Independent power producers and how we got here. I was just interacting this morning with Suleiman Abrahima of the Media Foundation for West Africa, the executive director, and he said that for him, look, we had a power situation, a crisis that had gone on for quite a while. The former president took the bull by the horns, resolved the problem, and now it was up to us to sustain the gains. But the question is, at what cost? Just over the weekend, in fact, on Thursday, I was at an event and a South African was there. He was talking of their own power crisis, the situation, and how it's come to the fore. But our peculiar case with the IPPs is still one that maybe we should really study. For you, looking at the chronological events that have followed with our independent power producers and our power purchase agreements, what would be your initial reaction to where we find ourselves currently, Kojo Poku?
I'm not surprised. I have always said on your program and various programs that when there is an hemorrhaging, somebody is bleeding, you need to stop the bleeding before you can fix the wound. As far back as 2017, and I keep referring to this famous vetting by Honorable Ejakun, when he said that we had a set amount of debt in the energy sector and we need to resolve it. And if we don't resolve it, it will cause the collapse of the industry. That was 2017 when the minister was being vetted. Then down the line, we had Honorable Amewu comes in, and he also put out a document which also stated the indebtedness in the energy sector, and the trajectory is on. And if we don't stop it, it would hit over 10 billion or so over a certain period. We have not stopped the reoccurrence of debt. So we have not stopped the bleeding. Without stopping the bleeding, you cannot cure the wound. What we should have done in 2017 was to stop the reoccurrence of debt. So we now say, look, from this day onwards, we are going to make sure that the debt doesn't reoccur. Then deal with the legacy debt. We've been dealing with the legacy debt through ESLA and through other means of paying off some of these debts. But the problem is that when we take one step backwards, behind us is the 2 steps backwards, which is the reoccurring of the debt. So today, the IPPs are saying that they are $1.3 billion in debt, indebted. I'm not surprised that we are here because some of us follow these events keenly. We've all said that for there to be very big transparency, okay, there must be certain things that needs to be done. You have losses in the system. We tried to do PDS. PDS did not work. Immediately, the government should have re-engaged the private sector to do the PSP, which is the private sector initiatives that we all said that should be what should be in there. Private sector participation in the distribution sector. We played politics with these things, and this is where we find ourselves. So I'm not surprised. I mean, we know exactly how we got here. How we get out of it is what nobody wants to talk about.
I see. Let me come to Mr. Yakubu, Adam Yakubu, Research Policy and Programs Officer at the Institute for Energy Security. For you, what is your take, your basic appreciation of the IPPs and how we got here to the point where they're even threatening to back out?
Yes. So let me first of all say good morning to your listeners wherever they are listening to us from. The IPPs and their participation in our energy sector, it is a component of the whole energy value chain where these IPPs come to augment the shortfall we have in the power generation space. So currently, per the numbers we have from PURC, the IPPs do about, in the last tariff review, they are currently doing some 70%, where our hydro does some 29%. So it should tell you that they are critical when it comes to their role in the power generation. How did they come to be part of our power generation? As far back as 2015, as Doc rightly stated, we were in a power crisis. And so there was the need to engage extra hands in power generation. Several contracts were signed with independent power producers, as we call them IPPs, to come and help in the generation of power. That is how most of these companies got engaged with the government and got engaged in our power value chain. Down the line, and as they keep producing this power, we are supposed to be collecting monies. So you have the whole value chain, the IPPs and the hydrothermal plants at one side. You have the Ghana Grid Company, which is Gridco, as the transmission company. You have ECG, NETCO, Enclave Power as the distribution companies. So these IPPs, together with our hydrothermal plants, produce the power through Gridco, then it gets to ECG. ECG distributes it to the households. What it means is that ECG, on the other side, is supposed to collect whatever monies are owed these IPPs, then pay them backwards. So when they pay them backwards, then IPPs are able to recover their operations costs. If you look at the numbers we have from the regulators of the sector, certain standards are supposed to be met in distribution losses, technical losses, allowed numbers. However, over the years, ECG itself has not been able to stay within the standards. So even when they pick the power from the beginning, you would realize that they pick 100% and they are already losing some 30% of the whole monies they are supposed to collect. then out of the remaining 70%, they are not also able to recoup all these 70%. And so right from the start, we start the whole process with debt. And so you realize that when you keep doing this over the years, even just by collecting power from the producers, you already incur some amount of debt in that. And so you will be forced to what? Oh, even when the vehicle hasn't even moved. So these debts pile up over the years. And because of some scrupulous individuals who do not pay the tariffs, and ECG not also being able to police the tariff system very well, the debt accumulates over time. Then we find ourselves in the situation we find ourselves today.
And that is quite an interesting picture that has been painted. But looking at the agreements we entered into, that is with these independent power producers, even before we get into the nitty-gritty, we do know that the World Bank country director, Pierre-Franck Laporte, has said that they were too costly at the time. But other experts have said they ended the Dumsor situation. While this existing government has claimed it ended Dumsor, I think it is common knowledge that through the engagement of the IPPs and others, the previous administration did that. But the question is, at what cost? There have been responses from the NDC on this bid, but I want, gentlemen, your take on how costly our IPPs were vis-a-vis their relevance to us and how much we've been paying over time. I'll start with you, Adams, and then I'll go to Kojo-Poku.
Yes, so IPPs are very important to us at the moment. And so at the time we were engaging them, let's state it that we were in a crisis at that moment. And so these are independent companies, and they would what? Negotiate on the part of your weakness. So the IPPs at the time realized that the power buyer, in this case the government of Ghana, was handicapped and was vulnerable. So a lot of them took advantage of the situation, and so definitely you have the cost being slightly higher than you would have on what at the time in the industry. And this is a trajectory that occurs in most developing countries. So it is good the World Bank country director brought it up. We at the IES think that it is time the World Bank even engages the IPPs and how they deal with developing countries.
Are you saying you corroborate what he says, that we struck a bad deal, so to speak, that it was too expensive? Because looking at some of what the minority has said, it may not necessarily be the case. So are you backing what the World Bank country director said?
Not to sound political, but what he was trying to bring our attention to as a country, we should always understand that these are wake-up calls, that when we are going into negotiations, we go in with our best foot. But what I'm trying to state is that at the time those agreements were signed, we were vulnerable. Like Doug did state, that there was a wound, and so you needed to heal the wound at that material moment. So at the time you are signing the agreement when you are vulnerable, the companies that are engaging you are going to engage you on the position of your weakness, which is you need power at that moment. So at what cost it comes, you need the power to keep the lights on, because at the time the crisis was there, none of us would have asked how much it would cost us to bring the power. We all wanted the power to be available. And so if you want the power to be available, what does it take to make the power available? This is what I am simply trying to say, that these multinationals engaging with developing countries take advantage of the vulnerabilities of these developing countries to do what? To enrich their multinationals. And so developing countries also need a clever strategy to engage these multinationals to be able to get the best out of these companies.
Let me bring in Kojo-Poku. So listening to the rhetoric of the other side, the other side being the minority in parliament, the NDC, they say, for example, that the World Bank director should provide evidence of peer countries where would-be investors would have been willing to invest over $300 million and above in gas-to-power projects at the time without demanding some form of supply and power guarantees. They also state that the former administration, the erstwhile administration, are not the cause of Ghana's current energy sector problems. And they also point out that with all these agreements, they were subscribed to by the then minority, that is the MPP, when they were being signed, from Amandi to AXA to Ameri, and without any objections. So when you consider all of that, and then you look at where we find ourselves now, you, Kojo Poku, what would you have preferred in that situation? To not go the way of the IPPs, for Dumso to linger, have the crippling effect on the economy, or to go the way of getting the IPPs, the purchase power agreements or the power purchase agreements, and at a similar cost? What is your take on that?
Well, where I differ is at a similar cost. Now, you see, you have no option. The only option now, then, going forward, is the IPPs, the independent power producers. Today, as we speak, we need to engage more IPPs to bring on board more power, because we have a ticking time bomb where in 3-4 years, we might end up in a situation whereby we do not have enough installed capacity. But let me draw you
Wait. Hold it right there, Kojo Poku. Are you saying that we need to bring on board more IPPs? You remember that we've been told that we had excess capacity, and hold for me. That by and by we've been consuming that. Are you suggesting that we're getting to the point where we may need even more, and that a few years down the road we could have Dumso again?
Yes, that's what I'm saying to you. Excess capacity ceased in 2020. As of 2019, 2020, there was no more excess capacity in our system. The excess capacity situation only existed in 2017, 2018, and 2019. Into 2020, we had come out of excess capacity. So as we speak now, our peak demand is about 3,775. Okay?
Megawatts.
We are almost, sorry?
Did you say, do you mean megawatts?
Megawatts, yes. 3,775 megawatts is our peak demand now. Now, as per our growth, we are doing about 250 megawatts every year. So by next year, we would have basically hit that 4,000 mark, which means that we do not have any wiggle room. When we need, if we continue growing at that rate, we will need about 1,500 by 2028, which means that we need to start that now. But let me go back and answer your initial question, which you put earlier. How did we negotiate those expensive PPAs at the time? When you are in a crisis and you don't have money, and you find yourself in darkness, and you do not have the in-house capacity to be able to resolve the problem, you would get yourself in that situation where you did, where companies that come in will basically hold you where it hurts. Because it's a very simple thing. You need to procure emergency power, and most of these power purchases that came in under what is called an emergency power agreement, EPA, okay? The normal processes of procuring power is through a power purchase agreement. Because it was an emergency situation, we procured power under EPA, which is the emergency power, which scraps all the processes of you having to go through Energy Commission and all the steps that you need to go through to get a power installed. Now, if everybody says that we procured expensive power, it's not an argument, it's not a conversation. The gas we procured at that time was expensive. The power we procured at that time was expensive. I don't know why anybody would want to argue with that. If you compare all the countries that are procuring power, right, through gas, independent power producers, what Ghana procured was expensive.
Compared to which other countries? Compared to which other countries? Because they also made the point that at the time, comparatively.
So let me explain. Compared to Turkey, compared to India, compared to a lot of companies, but a lot of countries. But the point is, these countries do not sit in sub-Saharan Africa. Okay? Sub-Saharan Africa, you have problem with when you are now trying to do some of these funded projects where the interest on some of these loans are much higher than when companies sit in the Europe and in the Asias. Okay, so in Africa, we have a very peculiar problem where in most cases, when we are having to now do some of these projects, we pay more. because in sub-Saharan Africa, interest rate is higher. Okay, but the situation we found ourselves at the time, that's why I have always said that MPP can always accredit NDC that they messed up the economy, signed high PPAs, but credit them with the fact that they are the one that brought in the installed capacity. You can't have it both ways. You can't say that somebody messed something up, but you said that you are the one who brought in. That's not true. You know what I'm saying? We have always said that as a civil society organization, we've said that in between 2012 and 2016, we procured expensive power. We procured more than necessary, okay? Because at the time, we had about 10,000 PPA signed, 10,000. We didn't need all those 10,000 PPAs. So you remember there was a committee that came in and rescheduled some of these PPAs and canceled some of them. Though we were in a crisis and we're trying to solve the crisis, we overdid it. Okay, so between 2012 and 2016, there was a lot that went on that was not right. And I have engaged Dr. Kwabena Donkor on other platforms and pointed out to him that even when he took over, there were existing purchase agreements that were signed as far back as 2012, 2013. And even those power purchase agreements were expensive. Okay, so look, let's not miss words. Yes, it's true that we procured expensive power. But the point to me is that what was the alternative? There is no alternative. Today, if we are to engage the extra 1,500 that we want, we are saying that we are no longer going to give take and pay. It's not possible. Nobody is going to come and invest in Ghana without take or pay because the existing companies that have guarantees are not being paid. So if you want to give confidence in the system, if you want to let people have confidence to bring their hard-earned money into Ghana to invest in your power generation, you need to pay the existing guys.
In other words, you must incentivize the situation for them. Else, if they have no incentive, and the incentive is money.
Yes, you have to pay them. But you are not paying. Look, the government position now is that we will not give any guarantee. Fine. The guys who have guarantees, you are not paying them. Okay, so how much more the person who comes in doesn't have a guarantee? So nobody will bring their money in. So the only situation that is going forward is that the likes of Asogli, AXA, Car Power, who are already in the country, are negotiating with government to build new plants. But for me, that's dangerous. Because today, as my brother said earlier, the IPPs make up about, through thermal generation, they make up about 72% of our generation. That is spread over about 6 companies. If you allow the access, the Car Power and the Asoglis to increase their generation, you will now get to about 2028, and 3 companies will probably make up about 51 or 55% of your thermal generation.
What are you afraid of? A monopoly? Are you afraid of a monopoly?
Yes.
Or maybe a duopoly, if you like.
If 3 companies own 55% of your generation, right there is a problem.
They can cripple you.
They can do anything. They can shut you down as a country.
Look,
the issue of us saying that we're not going to give guarantees, I have always said I was ill-informed. Okay, the committees that sat and made those decisions from a business point of view, I have always told the ministry that will not work. This whole issue of we're going to go through tender and basically not procure power from single source was ill-informed. Today, we are still procuring power through direct negotiation. We've done that with AXA for Kumasi. We are doing that with Asogli for other plans they want to bring on. Nobody is going to be able to do a tender between now and 2026. Okay, if we need new plans to come on in 2028, this year we are supposed to have a tender committee going on, whereby you finish your tender, go to financial closure by 2024, and then have the plans start building, and it will finish in 3 years. Because these plans don't just build overnight. Okay, so for me, the current government policies are the ones that is still going to not help us going forward.
Right.
But I think that to your question, to summarize, we procured expensive power at the time because there were no options, and nobody should come and argue that the power we procured was not expensive. It was expensive power, but it was the only solution we had.
Let me bring in Adams. Before I bring you a substantive question, I noticed you sort of with quite a look on your face when we spoke about the take or pay arrangement. But what is your take on that? And do you agree with Kojo Poku that in the next few years, if we do not sort out this very complex mix, we could be experiencing Dumso again?
Yes, and even in 3 years is far, because the IPPs have already threatened that by June 30th, if government doesn't cough up some money, they would. So that is the fears he's alluding to, that if they make up 70% of the generation mix, and they are threatening you that they will shut down. Imagine 70% of your power is gone. Even if they don't shut down and they try to ration the power, that is slashing the production they do at the end of the day. It will not be good for our economy. And so it is critical that the engagements be extensive.
Hello, Adams. We appear to be losing Adams Yakubu, who is with the IES. We'll try to see whether we can get the connection back. Later, we'll also be joined by an energy analyst who is in Oman. But let me come back to you, Kojo, even as we try to get Adams Yakubu back. With those fears of a shutdown by the end of this month, and in recent times, there was that conversation with Mr. Apetobo of the Chamber of Power Producing Companies. And he made it clear that this whole bit about restructuring is not going to help, that they are not willing to go down that road. Let's look at the restructuring of our $1.3 billion debt. The IPP say they need at least $450 million just to stay afloat, just to keep head above water. What is your reaction to that? And they're declining to restructure the debt owed them.
Okay, so this is where, again, I've had a problem with the approach of the Ministry of Finance. When you owe somebody as a country, there is, in any negotiation, there is a carrot and stick approach. You need to go to that table with something to give the other person. It's a company who have invested their money and you owe them. They are not there to do you a favor. But they are happy to be in Ghana. They've invested so much money, employed a lot of Ghanaians, and they are happy to be here. Because most of these companies, like I said earlier, the rates they got in Ghana, they won't get anywhere else. So they are happy to be here. But it doesn't mean that they are happy to kill themselves to be here. So you have to go to that table with a carrot. What's that carrot? The carrot is that you owe them. You need to be able to say that, look, I owe you 1.3 billion. I'm putting maybe 500 million on the table to clear that part of that indebtedness. But then the 800 million that is left, let's try and reschedule that maybe over a period of a certain time, and then maybe let me take a haircut for me here and there. It's a negotiation. Nobody will walk out of that room happy. Anytime you have a good negotiation is when both parties don't get what they want. Okay, but you, the government, Ministry of Finance, cannot just go to the room and say that, look, I'm going to restructure your debt. I don't have any money to give you, and you think they will agree? Nobody will agree. So my proposal, and I have spoken to a few people that, look, try and find about 500 million for these people. When you do that, then you can negotiate with them with the balance. And then the next step is that you stop the reoccurrence of the debt, because nobody is going to take a haircut or restructure their debt, knowing very well that in 2 years' time or 3 years' time, they'll be back to the same table to renegotiate that same debt that existed before, because you have not stopped the reoccurrence of debt. If you read the letter from the IPP, from Togbe Afede, he talked about the cash waterfall, okay, and how it's not working. And for me, those are some of the problems that we have in the system. You know what? Sometimes everybody say that, oh, civil society, you guys talk too much. Everybody was talking about the Christ waterfall as a panacea for all our problems. And some of us said that, no, the cash waterfall is not. Because the cash waterfall only distributes what comes in. It's not the panacea to the problem. What is the solution to the problem? Is the private sector investment to stop the 30% technical and financial losses that we have. That is the problem. You need to stop that. Anytime you send out 1 million Ghana cedis of power, 300,000 of that is lost off the top. 26% of that is factored into the tariffs me and you pay. So if the losses are reduced, one, our tariffs that we pay will be cheaper. Two, we'll be able to get more money to pay back the IPPs. Why are we not wanting to go that route and not get private sector to invest in the distribution? Government cannot do that. Does not have the money. So, look, my brother, it's a bit of a mouthful. I don't know why government wants to go that route, but let's see what goes on.
So you're saying the approach is wrong. Hold for me. Let me see whether I can get Adam Yakubu back. Mr. Yakubu, can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you, Ben.
Okay, so let's go back to the earlier point you were making. And if you have any reactions to what Kojo Poku has said, do bring them to bear before we move on to the next question.
Yes, so with the take-or-pay arrangements, like we have stated everywhere that developing countries or even power purchase agreements by their nature, you cannot do away with take-or-pay because it's more of an insurance clause that is inserted in the agreements to give the power producer some leverage that at the end of the day, whatever you are coming to do, at least some of it would be taken care of. And so it is still going to be very difficult, government saying they won't do take-or-pay. When just recently, the recent power purchase agreements that were signed with AXA, you have those take-or-pay clauses still inserted in them. And so it should tell you that we need to be honest with ourselves. What we can do, we cannot do it. What we can do, we try to improve upon it. And so that take-or-pay, we as a country where we are now, it will be extremely, extremely difficult to say we won't do take-or-pay. We cannot guarantee that when the power is produced, we will take it. And so making it difficult. And to add to what Doctor said, that the whole issue, if you look at it, comes from the revenue that we are supposed to collect when this power is produced. That is where we get the whole conversation wrong from the beginning. When you get the revenue mobilization drive right, then you are good to go. So we even propose that it is like ECG feels a bit overwhelmed. Why don't we allow private sector to invest by zoning the whole country into smaller zones so that these private revenue collectors they are private people and they know that at the end of the day, they are supposed to do what? To cough up some money to pay IPPs. They won't sleep on the job. But this is the case that ECG is a state company. ECG is chasing another state institution that owes them money, and it takes government to come in to call ECG to order that, look, give them some time, they would pay the money. What baffles me is even private companies that owe ECG to tunes of huge sums of money. And it will shock you to know that these are companies that submit audited accounts, and on their audited accounts, income statements, they have a column where we have electricity. They put a figure there and report it, state profits, and pay taxes on that. Do you know what it means? They are not even declaring the right profits to the government. And so right from there, they are shortchanging the system. And so we need to police the whole revenue system very well. To me, or we at IES, if we zone the country into smaller zones and allow for private investments, the PDS was good, but we got the whole thing being politicized, and government has virtually abandoned that conversation. But that is actually the right step to take if we want to get the activities of debt, legacy debt in the energy power sector right. Then we need to bring in, just like we did for our deregulation, if we do the same thing, deregulate the distribution value chain, definitely you have private investment, you have competition, then you have efficiency. And so we can't be political about it, and you cannot be diplomatic about it. The whole issue would come down to the activities of ECG NEDCO. If they get their revenue mobilization right, then we are good.
Let me bring in Dr. Yusuf Suleimana. He's an energy strategist. He joins us from Oman. Doc, thank you for joining the conversation.
Yeah, thank you very much, Ben, and good afternoon or good morning to you.
Good.
Your chair is yours.
Right. So, two quick points. One, we've already set sail on the conversation in terms of the relevance of these power purchase agreements, bringing in the independent power producers, and the give or take situation in terms of the benefits versus the cost. But now, the independent power producers are telling us that by end of June, if you don't come up with something reasonable, we might just shut down. That would be disastrous. Later on, I'll find out from you, gentlemen, what the effects could be, whether they ration or shut down completely, what the effects could be. But wanting $450 million just to stay afloat versus our wanting to restructure $1.3+ billion in debt. Are we being realistic in dealing with the situation? Our government, I mean.
Yeah, thank you very much. So it's a kind of a difficult situation. First of all, I think we haven't been able to quantify or, let me say, understand what we are dealing with in terms of the gravity, of the situation that we are dealing with. If you notice, I'm sure maybe some of your panelists, some of them might have touched that. I just want to say that if you look at how these IPP guys came to the picture, they didn't come out of blue. There was an issue, a burning issue, that came to play, and we needed to solve it head on. And when they came, they did so well. I mean, as we speak now, if not 50%, they are occupying about 50% of the market share in terms of what we consume on a daily basis, electricity that I'm talking about. And so if you understand the situation, and then we are able to handle this precarious situation, then we are bundling around how much this person needs to give and how much this person needs to take. I think it's not going to solve the problem. So I'm just saying that, Ben, the IPP, they have come to stay, and though I have problems with some of the contracts that were signed, but that's gone. I mean, we have to look at situations.
You say you may have a problem with some of the contracts that were signed. Which ones and why?
I agree that some of the contracts then was draconian, and which we of course we have moved on. I'm good shape. And so what I want to say is that if the IPP should take power, I mean, if they go with the promise what they want to do, and they actually go and take power or take their share, or even part of their share from the system, we're going to run into big troubles, and we're going to do so again. And I think we all know what Dumso came. I mean, when Dumso came, what it brought. It wasn't something pleasant. So I want to urge the government or the policymakers of the day, I mean, to sit them down. I always say that, I mean, we have to judge and look at something reasonable. Can we meet their demand halfway? If we can do that, I think the way to go. But I think there's no time. We are running out of time. And the high time we understand the situation, the gravity of the situation, the better. So the policymakers of the day can sit down with the IPPs, because they have come to stay and their relevance cannot be underestimated. So far as how power generation is concerned, yeah.
I hear all three of you rather scarily suggesting that we could be gripped in the throes of Dumso once again. And that would be quite a picture, because we've expended so much money as a state, as a country, to get ourselves out of that, the crippling effects it had on our economy from all facets of society. If we end up there again, gentlemen, wouldn't it just be recklessness? I mean, it's like getting indebted, having someone come to your aid, rescue you, put you on a certain pedestal, and then all of a sudden you go back to indebtedness. Then you cannot blame anybody. But I want to put it to you, Dr. Suleimana, in this from this angle, where with the IMF again, which comes with certain spending constraints. Even the recent batch they gave us was $600 million. These IPPs are saying they need $450 million just to stay afloat. Can we make the cut? That's what I need to know. Is it possible for us to meet them, their demands? Doc?
Yes, so that is just going to be difficult, I think, if you look at the numbers. But I always believe that, Ben, there's always a way out. We can't say there's no way out. They always say that, I mean, if you are targeting the the stars. You target the moon, you shoot, maybe you might get a star. So I think what the IPPs they are doing, some of this demand, of course, is so huge. And if you look at what has come into the picture and what they are demanding, it could be Herculean, for the government. However, I always feel that there can be a way out. So we want to know what the government is ready to offer them. I don't know whether they sit down to talk, because this is just dragging too much. So what I want to urge is that we are constrained, undoubtedly. And so let's come into the picture and look at how we can meet each other 50-50. But realistically, if you look at the quantum that is required and what is in, that might be difficult to meet. Nevertheless, I just believe that if the government sit down and negotiate in good faith with these IPPs, they are Ghanaians, most of them are Ghanaians, and they also understand this situation that we are in ourselves, So, but going forward, I want to move a little bit to that. I want to say that we need to look for sustainable solutions to all this. Generation aspect of this electricity wasn't something that we think will come, to be a day that we'll talk about generation. We've been talking about the fact that we have excess capacity, we have this and that and that. What has happened to all that? And the reason being that, yes, we have the physical infrastructure sitting down, but the utility point or whatever we need to get running, we haven't made provision for that. So going forward, I want to say that let's link up the power sector and then the petroleum sector. I mentioned this so many years ago. And if we have done that, what is affecting this thermal generation mix is the gas. Sometimes our trouble gas is going down. Our Ghana gas plant is going down. If we had multiple trains of Ghana gas, so that at any point in time that there's maintenance on one train, we don't need to think about, shutting down or doing rationing. These are the sustainable measures. So going forward, I think we have to link up this power sector and the petroleum sector. We have done that, but we have to streamline it and make sure that we have pipelines that can run from east to west of the country. We should have done that a long time ago. If you have this fiscal infrastructure sitting down and you think that you have generation capacity, you have excess capacity. No. You're going to be pumped down, and that's what is happening now. Yes. So these are the sustainable solutions that I think we need to champion. And if we do that, I don't think some of these things we're going to go back to them again. And I think my other guy, when I just joined, he mentioned the revenue stream. That is what I think we have to have a firm handle on. To make sure that if you look at the utility structure, the kind of losses that we have in terms of commercial losses, the other losses, maybe they might have mentioned it before I joined, that is always the pain of our issues. You can't keep pouring water into a leaking basket. If we cover this kind of leakages, I believe it will go a long way to impact even and make our tariff structure very competitive, so far as industry is concerned and so far as domestic consumption is concerned. Ben.
Kojo, have we bitten more than we can chew? In this regard, we have to come up with $450 million for them to stay afloat. We even want them to restructure about $1.3 billion. But at the same time, we're in the grips of an IMF situation. What's your take?
Well, Ben, you keep saying that, and I don't know why everybody is making this as if it's the government is the majority shareholder of ECG, but ECG is a limited liability company. It is ECG that not government.
In the end, government has been the entity pulling the strings all through. We all know the fact that it is the ECG and all of that. But who has been the arrowhead for this? It has been government policy.
Yes, but that's the problem. But you see, Kojo Poku can restructure that debt for them if it's an ECG debt. Government of Ghana is in the IMF, so they can't restructure 450 million or 1.3 billion. I can restructure ECG debt for them. Okay, because it's a commercial debt. It's not a government debt. Commercial debts can be restructured. You just need to look at ECG's revenue stream. ECG has to commit a certain amount of their revenue stream for a certain amount of years to whoever is prepared to restructure the debt. There are people who buy debt. You can go to the debt market and sell your debt. And there are people who buy your debt, which is what we try to do in the bond market, whereby we go and buy bonds. But debts can be restructured in a way where somebody can buy the debt at a certain rate and then basically, but what the most important thing here is that Ministry of Finance, which is leading this thing, is handicapped because Ministry of Finance is treating it as if it is a GOG debt. It's not. It's an ECG debt, so treat it as a commercial debt. Yes, the banks might refinance it. You might have external banks that might want to refinance it at a certain interest rate, right? Because as a ceiling in a country, because we have a D rating, companies might come in and give a certain amount of interest rate on the debt that might be high. But it's better than sitting there and government trying to scrap your hand. I have spoken to the MD of ECG, and I have told him certain things. That look at finding a medium to long-term debt as a company. It's not a Ministry of Finance is trying to help ECG resolve this problem with the IPP. But ECG should make a business decision. And the business decision is that you are indebted to the IPPs. You have revenues, and you know what? Good to Dubek. He has been able to, the MD of ECG, he's been able to increase ECG's revenue from about 450 million, 500 million to about 1 billion Ghana cedis every month. So Mr. Mahama, who is now the MD of ECG, has been able to double the revenue of ECG. So what it means is that if you are to look at it as a business transaction, okay, then you can restructure your debt over the medium to long term. And let's deal with it as a business transaction, not as a government, because government can help you. Before, we will say that government will go to the Eurobond, borrow more, bring it and pay you, so that in the long run, ECG will pay government. Now, government cannot do that. Now, you, ECG, should take a business decision that as a business, I'm indebted of 1.3 billion. How do I deal with it? Take half of that, go into the market and restructure it. You might pay a little bit more on interest, but it's possible.
It's possible. That's just what I wanted from you. Right before we wrap the conversation, gentlemen, let me come to Adams Yakubu on this point. So what would it mean if these IPPs start rationing power, or even worse, shut down altogether? What would be the real implications of that?
Yes, that would mean that we would have been losing some 72% of the total power that is being produced by these IPPs. And you can even imagine I think recently when there was a problem at Atuabo, some parts of the country had to go through rationing, and you could see the inconvenience. We all know what Dumso had been like in 2012, 2013, coming forward to 2015. So I'm not sure any one of us is prepared to go through that. And so whatever it takes for ECG, government of Ghana, to engage IPPs in a more amicable way to get a solution to this, like Doug did rightly state, is a commercial debt. What do? You can sell it to debt people, then they deal with it. You take the money, you give it to the IPPs as a short-term measure, then you find a way of ensuring that we would always call for the policing of your revenue. When you collect enough, you have enough to pay. But when you don't collect enough, definitely you don't even have the money to pay. You've not collected it. How then do you pay for it?
Right.
And so to add to the efforts of the MD for ECG, we are also pleading with unscrupulous people who go through that crime of stealing the power and thinking it's for government. Like we have explained, government doesn't owe any power. The power is paid for by private people, and so the money needs to be collected and given back to the person who is producing the power.
Right.
So if you are stealing the power and thinking you are being smart, it will get to a point that the power is not even available for you to steal.
Right. Gentlemen, we have just a few minutes to wrap up on this conversation. I'm going to allot a minute each, maximum a minute to each of you. And I just want you to address two quick questions. One, so have we been reckless in getting to this point in terms of our energy situation? Have we been reckless in getting to this point? That is, in managing the situation. And two, in terms of shifting our power sources, energy transition. We've been told that we're in the process of building our first nuclear power plant as part of measures to create that sort of mix. Is nuclear energy the way to go on the back of what problems other countries employing it have to face? I'll start with you, Dr. Suleimana. Less than a minute each, please. Dr. Suleiman. Hello, Doc. Dr.
Yes,
Suleiman.
Sorry. I think I was muted. So with the first part of it, I want to just quickly say that not reckless, but not being strategic. That's why we find ourselves here. And is this avoidable? Yes, if with a bit of strategy, we could have avoided that. But finding ourselves in this situation, we can't go back and think what we didn't do right and start complaining about what we should have done. We can just tackle the bull by the horn. We are already in the precarious situation. I urge government to sit down with the IPPs. There will always be a way out. But yes, if it's a bit of poor planning that has brought us to this place. I told you that earlier on, if we had linked up the power and the petroleum sector a long time ago, I think we would have been very competitive in terms of what we churn out, the per kilowatt hour the end user use. It would have been very competitive. Albeit we can still do something. Now, the second part of it, I think it's an excellent one. Energy transition has come to stay, and then especially the aspect of nuclear. Nuclear is not all that bad, Ben. Technology has advanced to the extent that we have modular reactors. The main thing is that once you are able, to take care of the safety ramifications or the safety aspect of nuclear power, you are good to go. In fact, nuclear power is one of the greenest source of power that you can talk about. And nuclear power can run continuously for a very long time with less maintenance. The only aspect of it is that we need to be able to take care of the safety aspect. And I think with what our nuclear units they are doing, they are in the right path. Once they are able to take care of the safety aspect of it,
right,
we should be good to go. And I think we need to diversify our generation portfolio. And nuclear comes to mind. Other energy sources, we need to bring it in to be able to. We don't have to rely on the thermal conventional means. Yeah, we can diversify the portfolio. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Dr. Suleiman. Kojo Poku.
Hi, Ben. I wouldn't use the word reckless. We've not had an in-depth focus. We think it's gone. We just dismantle the committees. Everybody go around as business as usual, but it's not. That's why I have always advocated that we should have a Ministry of Power. I've always said that, look, the Ministry of Energy, it's outlived its usefulness. We should have a Ministry of Power that now focuses in our power sector because there is in-depth problems within that sector. Okay? Ministry of Energy should be split to Ministry of Power so there's focus. Then you have Ministry of Oil and Gas to deal with the upstream problem. But I wouldn't say reckless. I would just say that we've not had focus and in-depth attention to the problem. And it will reoccur in the coming years if care is not taken. The second part of nuclear, I'm all for nuclear. I think that we can do it. But the problem is that in the situation that we are in, it will be difficult to find investors at this stage because all these things of not paying existing companies who are doing IPPs, getting the funding of private companies coming in to put their money into the country, we need to create the enabling environment for other investors to come. If we do not, pay existing companies and we do not let investors be reassured that we can pay our debt, a company coming to do nuclear will still be owed money and he will not pay.
Right.
Today, new power is old. All these IPPs are old. So we need to pay our indebtedness and make sure that that becomes a thing of the past and just basically move forward.
Thank you, Kojo Poku. Adams Yakubu, you'll have the final bite.
Yeah, so to just conclude, we would call for deal with the inefficiencies in the distribution stream and also make sure that the revenues that we mobilize, we are able to pay back to the IPPs. Then, as a country, we need to have a proper and a comprehensive projection of how our power situation would look like in the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years. Then we know which agreements are needed, which ones do we think we do not need. Like Doug did rightly state, we need some agreements. How long would it take us to get them? We need to know all that. The power sector, we play too much with it, like we do in other sectors. So we think that the inefficiencies in the system at the revenue side of the whole equation is where we need to tackle heads on, then we get any other thing falling out. The second part of the question is, I'm happy this has come up. We at the IES are currently concluding the activities of a research on the discovery of lithium, and each one of us know the role lithium plays in the energy transition conversation across the world. And Ghana has been fortunate to be one of the few countries in Africa that has this critical mineral. And so energy transition is something we cannot avoid. Even right from the start, we as a country are even getting the whole conversation wrong, because the whole world is talking energy transition and we are still talking about hydrothermal plants that generate hydrocarbons and still contribute to the conversations of what? Climate change and all that. So we as a country, our focus is even wrong from the global perspective. And so we think that this call for renewable energy, how can a country like Ghana, with all the renewable energy resources we have just 2% of our energy mix being renewable energy? This is most unfortunate. And so the conversation now should be, when we are looking into the future, what role would renewable energy play in our energy mix? I think this is what I would have to add.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. And that takes me back to even the 60s and what Kwame Nkrumah was doing, looking at atomic energy, nuclear energy, so to speak, and how so many decades on, we've actually not actualized in that regard. But those who joined us for this conversation, Kojo Poku, he's an energy analyst. Adam Yakubu, you just heard him speak. He is a Research Policy and Programs Officer with the Institute for Energy Security. And Dr. Yusuf Sulemana, an energy strategist all the way in Oman.